In wrestling, we talk a lot about pioneers. On this channel specifically, we've covered women pioneers. We talk about the people who broke barriers, who changed styles, who showed what was possible before the industry was really ready for it. But some pioneers don't get remembered because they didn't stay long enough for history to catch up. This is the story of one of the most unique women to ever step into a wrestling ring. A shooter, a submission specialist, a woman trained by legends, and accepted by one of the toughest locker rooms in the world. And she left the business before she could be fully appreciated. This is the story of Debbie Malenko. Debbie Malenko was born in March of 1971. She grew up a fan of professional wrestling at a time when it still felt rough around the edges, physical, and real. Debbie was an athlete in every sense of the word. As a kid, she played sports constantly. She played tackle football with the boys until she was around 16 years old. That's when she took up wrestling. She was tough, she was competitive, and she wasn't afraid of physicality. So the next step in her life made a lot of sense. After graduating high school in the late 1980s, a friend told Debbie about a wrestling school in Florida, run by a man named Boris Malenko. Boris Malenko was a respected veteran with a reputation for legitimacy. This wasn't about flashy moves or characters, this was about fundamentals, conditioning, and learning how to wrestle. Debbie signed up immediately. At Malenko's school, she trained under Boris himself as well as Joe and Dean Malenko. That's a hell of a technical wrestling learning tree to sit under. And Debbie's athletic background paid off almost immediately. By all accounts, she was a natural. She picked things up quickly. She was able to hang with the drills and she stuck with it. In an era where women's wrestling in the US was still incredibly limited in both opportunity and style, Debbie was being trained like a serious professional wrestler. Not a novelty, not a girl wrestler, a wrestler. In 1990, at just 19 years old, Debbie made her professional wrestling debut under the name Debbie Drake. She worked throughout Florida, including Dusty Rhodes' Professional Wrestling Federation, and quickly began getting regular spots on cards. One of her most notable early feuds was with AJ Watson. The two worked multiple matches together, including a cage match, something that wasn't exactly common for new wrestlers, let alone women at the time. She also worked regularly for Suncoast Pro Wrestling, a promotion based out of Palmetto, Florida. Suncoast was run by Boris Malenko and Henry Raines, as a place to give Malenko students real experience. It wasn't the big lights and big crowds of the WWF, but it was learning the ropes. At Suncoast, Debbie found one of the most important opponents of her early career, Penelope Paradise. The two had great chemistry and their matches felt like actual fights. There was urgency, there was a struggle. It's fascinating to see how good she was so early on, even if there was still some things to fine-tune. She was already an exceptional submission wrestler. These weren't just rest holds to get a breather. You feel like she's always on the attack. She flowed seamlessly from hold to hold. She wrestled with intention. Debbie has credited her time working with Penelope Paradise as a massive learning experience. One that helped her grow not just as a technician, but as a complete performer. While we're on the subject, check out the Suncoast Pro Wrestling YouTube channel. Lots of interesting matches on there. Mark Merrow, Dean Malenko, Gator Gilmore, it's pretty good. Also in 1990, Debbie began training with another name that carries almost mythical weight in wrestling history, Karl Gotch. Gotch was a shooter in the old school sense. His influence is all over Japanese wrestling, MMA, and catch wrestling. Of all the people he trained, there was only one woman. That woman was Debbie. She trained alongside names like Norman Smiley, absorbing Gotch's philosophy and approach. This training period took her techniques to the next level. And it was during this time that a single photograph changed the course of Debbie's life. A picture of Debbie training with Karl Gotch appeared in a Japanese wrestling magazine. Someone in the All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling office saw it, and immediately they wanted her. So in late 1990 or early 1991, one day after a training session, Debbie, her mom, Boris Malenko, and a couple of AJW representatives sat down at a Sizzler restaurant, and Debbie signed her deal to live, train, and wrestle in Japan for 6 months. In March 1991, Debbie debuted for All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling. one of the most competitive and demanding promotions in the world. Before leaving for Japan, Boris Malenko suggested she adopt the Malenko name. It carried credibility, especially internationally, and it would give her instant legitimacy. Debbie Drake became Debbie Malenko. Like most newcomers to AJW, she went through the dojo training. Thankfully, her background with the Malenkos meant the transition wasn't as brutal as it could have been. But matches were another story. Debbie has said that her early matches in Japan were nerve-wracking. Wrestling in front of Japanese crowds felt like wrestling under a microscope. The fans weren't loud, they didn't really react. They were watching everything. And Debbie really stood out. Not only was she a Gaijin, but she wrestled differently than the rest of the AJW roster. At the time, All Japan Women's was known for its brutal style, hard strikes, devastating suplexes, a constant escalation of violence. Submissions, when they were used at all, were typically transitional holds or brief rest spots. But Debbie Malenko didn't wrestle like that. She was a submission wrestler. Instead of abandoning her style to fit in, she adapted it to the AJW environment. Her holds became sharper, her transitions faster, her offense more aggressive. And clearly, the office noticed. By October of 1991, just months into her run, Debbie was teaming with Manami Toyota against Akira Hokuto and Bull Nakano. That's not a spot for someone you don't believe in. When Debbie returned from Japan, she continued to work for Suncoast Pro Wrestling. With more experience and confidence, her matches with Penelope Paradise got even better. In January 1992, Debbie began teaming regularly with Saki Hasegawa. They were close in age, they were energetic, they had compatible styles. And almost immediately the team found success. They defeated Mariko Yoshida and Takako Inoue to win the AJW Tag Team Championships. While it was a secondary tag title, it was still a major vote of confidence. Working for promotions like Wing, FMW, and even CMLL in Mexico. According to Debbie, the Mexico tour was a blast. They got to have fun in matches, try new things without the constant scrutiny of the AJW office. It was a good time, but it also helped her grow even more as a performer. In February of 1993, Debbie Malenko reached a new milestone. She defeated Kairo Ito to win the AJW Championship. Again, this wasn't the WWWA title, but it was a singles championship, and another clear sign that the promotion saw a future in her. Her lone title defense came later that month at Korakuen Hall against Terry Power, and it's a phenomenal match. The pre-match promos frame them as friends, but in the ring, Terry Power takes on a dominant heel role, throwing Debbie into chairs, overpowering her, just imposing her will. Debbie responds the only way she knows how. She picks a limb targeting the arm. She's relentless. Piece by piece, she breaks Terry down until she locks in a chicken wing variation for the win. There's also a gorgeous top rope Northern Lights suplex that still holds up today. It's one of the best representations of who Debbie Malenko was as a wrestler. And unfortunately, it would come right before everything ended. On February 16, 1993, Debbie Malenko and Saki Hasegawa faced Manami Toyota and Toshio Yamada. It was a big match, and a pretty good one until things left the ring. At one point on the outside, Debbie's foot became tangled in the TV cables around the ring. When Manami Toyota went for one of her signature dives to the outside, Debbie tried to get into position to catch her, but her feet weren't planted properly. Her ankle snapped clean in half. It's a gruesome injury. Reminds me a lot of Ali Catch's injury from a couple years ago. Very similar. It's a stark reminder that everything in wrestling can be a risk. Toyota didn't realize what had happened and kept working with Debbie. Debbie eventually had to scream that she was hurt to get a break. Thankfully, Hasegawa immediately worked Toyota away so Debbie could alert the ringside doctor. Debbie was pulled from the match with Terry Power carrying her to the back. Hasegawa finished the match alone. The next day, Debbie took the bullet train to Tokyo for surgery. And when she returned to the United States, everything had changed. Debbie Malenko was just 22 years old. She decided she wanted to start a family, so she retired from wrestling. Debbie has said that once you leave that life, even though it's what you loved, it's incredibly hard to go back. She settled into family life and left wrestling behind. But not forever. In November 2001, Debbie returned to the ring for a match against Jessie Bennett for Arzeon in Japan. It was an appropriate setting for her comeback. Arzeon was built on submission-based women's wrestling, something Debbie and Mariko Yoshida helped pioneer. Go watch DCW episode 25 and you'll see the influence. In 2017, Debbie returned again, this time as part of Mariko Yoshida's retirement show, standing across the ring from her one more time in a 6-woman tag. Then in 2021, Debbie took on a new challenge, making her MMA debut in May. Later that year, she returned to wrestling once more, competing in the Women's Invitational Cup at NWA Empower, and later winning a 6-woman battle royal for Twisted Wrestling in Florida. In 2022, Debbie wrestled 2 high-profile matches, losing to Masha Slamovich and then defeating Billy Starks, bridging the generations one more time. As of this recording, Debbie has even wrestled a match as recently as May of 2025, when she had a match for Twisted Wrestling. So who knows if she'll actually ever be done. Debbie Malenko's career was short, and unlike Mad Maxine, it wasn't exactly on her terms. She hadn't fully realized her potential, in my opinion, and her impact is really just now beginning to be felt. She helped legitimize submission-based women's wrestling in Japan, which, like most trends in wrestling, crossed over to the US. I really wonder what the modern US women's wrestling scene would be like if Debbie was able to stick around for the new generation women's division. Imagine having Alundra Blaze, Bull Nakano, Heidi Lee Morgan, and Debbie Malenko on WWF TV putting on fantastic wrestling matches. She was 20 years ahead of her time, and thanks to the internet, she's more accessible to new fans than she ever was. Sometimes the most important pioneers aren't the ones who stayed the longest. They're the ones who showed what was possible. And that was Debbie Malenko. Let me know any thoughts you have about Debbie Malenko in the comments. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by subscribing or tracking me down on social media, either here or here. I'm Scott from retrospective. Watch wrestling. Love wrestling. Thanks for watching.